the winter of 1974, 4 helmsmen were selected to represent Australia in a World Yachting Championship. These helmsmen were from Tasmania, Colin Purdon and Matthew Anderson. The class they sail is an international cadet, and during the winter months it meant hours of practice, together with other members of the Sandy Bay Sailing Club, in an effort to bring themselves, their crews and their yachts to a peak of efficiency for the racing that lay ahead in Portugal. The Cadet was designed by Jack Holt of England and is 3.2 metres long with a total sail area of 9.4 square metres. It's a very strictly controlled one design class with over 7,000 racing throughout the world. Originally intended as a junior training dinghy, it soon gained international status and in fact is the only international class that has an age limit. A cadet helmsman or crew must be 17 years or under. The boats the boys sail, TT and Grasshopper, were shipped to Portugal well in advance of the championship, so the helmsmen and their crews, Alan Gumley of TT and Robert Oldmeadow of Grasshopper, had borrowed boats for this practice period. A bleak winter's morning heralded the departure from Hobart Airport, but the warmth and sincerity of the good wishes from supporters more than compensated.
Announcing the departure of Qantas Flight 1 from Melbourne to London via Singapore, now boarding from Gate Lounge 3.
Leaving Melbourne aboard a jumbo jet was an exciting event, and when the flight captain invited the boys into the cockpit of the 747, it was something to be remembered. Ahead lay Singapore and then Europe. Singapore Island is one of a group of islands off the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula. The city of Singapore is one of the great commercial centres of Southeast Asia, with a population of over 1 million. In 1965, Singapore broke away from the Federation of Malay States and is now completely independent. The development of Singapore is associated with Sir Stamford Raffles, an official of the British East India Company, who landed here in January 1819 to establish a trade station on the route to the Far East. Singapore, then a small fishing village, prospered with a policy of free trade and encouragement to settlers. The present population is made up of 76% Chinese, only 12% Malay, and 8% Indian and Pakistan. Singapore is a colourful and very clean city, and its continued rapid growth has meant the construction of many new housing estates. One of the most popular tourist attractions are the Tiger Balm Gardens. These brightly painted, sometimes grotesque statues and carvings were built by a family that was famous for its healing ointment, known throughout the world as Tiger Balm. The highest point on the island gives a panoramic view of the city with its ever-changing skyline. The team travels on to Lisbon and then 40 kilometres south to the old city of Setúbal. A few kilometres offshore is the Troya Peninsula, and it's here that the racing will be conducted. The flags of many nations fly at the Galley Pavilion as crews from all over the world give their boats a final preparation. The Artful Dodger from the United Kingdom won the series in 1973. This year, a new skipper will be at the helm. Anaconda is the current Australian champion. Frank Busek has had his last season in cadets, and he, together with his sister Addie, will be a strong contender for the series. Grasshopper's crew make sure everything is okay, while the South Australian entry, Tiger 4, prepares for the first race. The winds around this part of the Portuguese coast are predominantly very light. In the morning, a steady onshore breeze of between 2 and 5 knots, and late in the afternoon, a change to the northwest can be expected. The first practice race got underway with a typical light southwest breeze. TT got a good start near the committee boat, while Grasshopper decided to go for a safe leeward position. Altogether, 26 yachts from 11 nations were contesting the series, and in this first practice race, everybody's anxious to find out how the opposition is going to perform. Grasshopper, closely followed by TT, are first to the windward mark, and it's a really promising start for the Tasmanian boats. The entry from Argentina was an early casualty, but in the meantime, Anaconda managed to get boy room on TT at the second windward mark. Unfortunately, the wind was rapidly dropping, and the course had to be shortened. Anaconda drifted through to take first place from Grasshopper, with TT third. Start of the first heat saw the Polish boat 1338 getting away well at the buoy end of the line. Anaconda and Grasshopper were bunched in the middle of the fleet. Shortly after the start, Tiger 4 was leading from the Polish entry, with the others close astern. At the first windward mark, it was 1338 from Poland, narrowly from Grasshopper, with Anaconda in third spot. The next beat saw Grasshopper get through into first place, and Anderson rounded well clear ahead of Busek in Anaconda. The wind maintained its steady 5-knot average, and Grasshopper increased her lead to finish comfortably ahead of Anaconda and take the first heat. The second heat was scheduled for the afternoon of the same day, so this meant all competitors had to stay at sea to wait for the start. Just before the start of the second heat, the wind shifted to the south so that a starboard tack would only just clear the line. This shift caught many, but enabled Grasshopper to get well clear at the buoy end of the line. At the windward mark, Grasshopper led from the top Belgium entry as 6253, then conclusion from the United Kingdom and Anaconda. The order remained unchanged at the apex, but towards the leeward mark, the wind dropped, and the race virtually started again from this point. Anaconda decided to come well to leeward of the mark. She picked up a little more breeze, and with sheets eased a little, moved up on the leaders. Grasshopper and TT, however, appeared to make a wrong move when they tacked on to starboard shortly after rounding. At the windward mark, it was Facetious from England leading, but the wind dropped, and with a shortened course, the race went to Magic from Poland, Anaconda second, and Facetious third. The third heat was started the following morning, and it was Grasshopper at the first windward mark, leading from Poland, with Anaconda third. At the apex, the leaders were still the same, with the Artful Dodger in 7th position ahead of Tiger 4 and TT. Anaconda was still in third position at the leeward, followed by Conclusion, then 7038 from Portugal, 6216 from South Africa, the Artful Dodger, Tiger 4, and TT in 9th position. On the second beat, Anderson did not hold a tight enough cover on Busek, and this enabled Anaconda to get through and take a comfortable lead of about 30 seconds over Grasshopper at the second windward mark. Poland was now back in third position, then Conclusion, followed by TT, who had managed to get ahead of Tiger 4, and the Artful Dodger. The final beat provided the best racing of the series, with the lead changing from Busek to Anderson several times. Near the finish, Anaconda managed to lead our Grasshopper. Anderson had to tack, but was unable to close the gap, and Anaconda took the third heat. The following day was a lay day, and all crews and supporters took advantage of a tour of the nearby coast. First stop was made at St. Philip's Castle. Built on a hill overlooking Stubble during the Spanish domination under the Philips, it has been converted into a state tourist inn and commands extensive views over the town and the Troya Peninsula. The sea has always played a great part in the life of Portugal. The famous voyages of discovery of Prince Henry the Navigator and of Vasco da Gama in the 15th century are part of history. Bordering the edge of the historic Arabida Peninsula are a succession of bays and beaches that typify the coastline in this area. On the way westward, a stop was made at Quena Castle near Sesimbra. The ruins of this massive structure were fascinating, especially to the Australian team. The day's tour concluded with a visit to one of the westernmost points in Europe, the dramatic Cape Espichel. The fourth heat was won by Grasshopper with Anaconda second, and the fifth heat sailed in the afternoon went to Anaconda with Grasshopper eighth. This all-important sixth heat meant that the consistent Anaconda had to finish third or better to win the series. All helmsmen were a bit anxious at this start, and a general recall was signalled. The second start was good, and at the first windward mark, Grasshopper had a commanding lead. For Anderson to take the championship, it meant that he had to win this sixth heat and have Anaconda in at least fourth position. Rounding the mark, it was Tiger 4 in second place, Conclusion third, South Africa fourth, and Anaconda fifth. At the leeward mark, Anaconda had moved up the third spot, followed by Conclusion. Then TT rounded fifth, followed by Poland, Yugoslavia, and South Africa. At the second windward mark, Grasshopper had gone further ahead, but Anaconda had now sailed into second place, well clear of Conclusion and Tiger 4. Grasshopper finished, but with Anaconda lying second, it meant that Matthew Anderson and crew Robert Oldmeadow had taken second place in the World Championship. The fine, consistent effort by Frank and Addy Busek with this second gave them the World Championship, a success richly deserved. Conclusion finished third in the heat, ahead of 6253 from Belgium and Tiger 4 in fifth place. TT finished eighth and rounded out a fine Australian effort. The seventh heat, which wouldn't have affected the first two places, had to be cancelled because of fog. Final placings in the 1974 Cadet World Championships were Anaconda, Australia first, Grasshopper, Australia second, Poland third, Tiger 4, Australia fourth, Poland fifth, Yugoslavia sixth, Belgium seventh, and TT, Australia eighth. With all the tension of the racing now behind them, many of the competitors spent some time touring Lisbon. This city, with over 1 million inhabitants, can be traced back over 3,000 years. In 1755, an earthquake destroyed 2/3 of the city. Much of the remaining third, with its narrow old streets, was preserved, and is in marked contrast to modern Lisbon with its broad, tree-lined avenues. The Black Horse Square, one of the largest in the world, extends for almost 2 kilometers along the waterfront. Here, as elsewhere in Lisbon, street stalls of all descriptions are a colourful part of the city's life. The wide estuary of the Tagus River is one of the most spacious and best sheltered natural harbours in all Europe. It was from here in 1588 that the Spanish Armada sailed towards England. Portugal at this time was under Spanish rule. The oldest part of the city is known as Alfama. With its confusion of narrow alleys, it is reminiscent of the past. It includes the early Roman settlement and also Moorish Lisbon. Like Rome, Lisbon is built upon 7 hills, and its rise as a trading centre dates from the 15th century, when the Portuguese extended their empire to Africa and India. The Tower of Belem was built in 1515. This impressive tower, erected during the reign of King Manuel I on the north bank of the Tagus, was intended to defend the harbour of Lisbon. Yachts from all over the world are found here in the marinas of the Lisbon yacht clubs. A new landmark is the memorial to Vasco da Gama and other Portuguese seafarers, which stands guard at the mouth of the Tagus.